Good morning. This is our offline video lesson number 2. Our discussion for today is ethnocentrism and cultural relativism. Ethnocentrism and cultural relativism, despite how humans have in a common cultural differences, are far more prevalent than cultural universal. The difference between the two. Ethnocentrism involves looking at another culture from the perspective of one's own culture, while cultural relativism involves looking at another culture by its own perspective instead one's own culture. Ethnocentrism defines by the anthropologists used to describe opinion that one own culture or one own way of life is natural or correct. It means that one may see his or her own culture as the correct way of living. Some cultures may be similar or overlap in ideas or concept. However, some people are in since shocked to experience difference they may encounter with individuals' culture indifferent than themselves. In extreme cases, a group of individuals may see another culture way of life and consider it wrongs. Because of this, the group may try to convert another group to their own way of living. Here are the basic characteristics of ethnocentrism, comprised in the 4 bullets. First, a sense of belonging to the ethnic groups. People are often present themselves in a particular way in order to belong to a specific social group. Example, a new member of a high school sports team might adopt the dress and mannerisms of the another members of the team in order to fit in within the rest of the group. Next, patriotism and nationalism, or patriotism and national awareness. Nationalism is an ideology based on premise that an individual's loyalty and devotion to one country should come above the interests and opinions of other citizens or the interests of certain group of citizens. The pride of nationalism, however, trumpets in a country's virtues and denies its deficiency. Nationalism is contemporaneous towards the virtues of another countries. It's wanted to be and proclaim itself to be the greatest. Patriotism is an attachment to the homeland, love, adoration for the place where an individual is born, brought up, and nation that place belongs to. These attachments can be related to ethnic, cultural, political, or historical. Patriotism is also being proud of a country's virtues, but with an eagerness and readiness to correct its deficiencies to be better. Patriotism acknowledges the patriotism of the citizen of another countries and respects their virtue. Next is a feeling of superiority towards another social group. So, means it's proud that country and its awareness are more clearly breeds blind arrogance and ignorance often leads to a war. So mataas ang tingin sa sarili, or itong grupong to mas mataas to kaysa sa ibang grupo. Yun ang ibig sabihin ng superiority. Cultural traditionalism. Adherence to tradition as authority, especially in a matter of religion. A system of philosophy according to which all knowledge of religious truths derived from the divine revelation and received by the traditional instruction. Next is cultural relativism. The ability to understand a culture on its own terms and not to make judgment using the standards of one's own culture. The goal of this is to promote understanding of cultural practices that are not typically parts of one's own culture. Using the perspective of cultural relativism leads to a view that no one culture is superior than another culture when compared to a system of morality, laws, political views, and etc. It is the concept that cultural norms and values derive their meaning within a specific context. This is also a basis on the idea that there is no absolute standard of good or evil. Therefore, everybody's decision and judgment of what is right and wrong is individually decided in each society. The concept of the cultural relativism also means that any opinion on ethics is subject to the perspective of each person within the particular culture. Cultural relativism have two categories, absolute and critical. When we say absolute, everything that happens within culture must and should not be questioned by outsider. For example, the extreme absolute cultural relativism would be the Nazi Party's point of viewing justifying the Holocaust. When we say Holocaust, if we go back to the history during discovery period, we have Holocaust in Germany. That is a massive killing at the time. So that is the example of absolute cultural relativism. Next or second is critical. Creates question about cultural practices in terms of who is accepting them and why. Critical cultural relativism also recognize power relationships. The characteristic of cultural relativism. Among the characteristics of cultural relativism, this can be mentioned. The use of information gathered from research into underlying value systems and beliefs of society to support on the basis of facts, different culture perspective, and their moral state. When we say value system, is a set of principles and ideas that drive and or guide your behavior. Your personal value system gives your structure and purpose by helping you to determine what meaningful and important to you. Beliefs of societies. The conviction that people hold to be true. Individuals in a society have specific beliefs, but they also share collective values. to illustrate the differences. For example, Americans commonly believe in the American dream that anyone who works hard enough will be successfully and wealthy. Underlying these beliefs is the American value that wealth is good and important. Our perception, perception in a culture as flexible, plural, and constantly evolving entity over different generation. So meaning individual differences will be tainted by their culture, meaning that they will see only those things valued by the culture as good and representation of another cultures as bad or inferior. It means that culture in which the individual was raised will color how they see the world. If the overall culture restricted and is skeptical of another, it could be led the individual to have same view. However, as an individual matures and see the values of culture. So that's all. This is your activity for this week. So choose one of the question below and answer. Mamili lang ng isa. Huwag na itong dalawa, isa lang. Para hindi na kayo mahirapan at ilagay ulit sa papel. At ito din yung quiz ninyo. So, siguro madali lang to kasi more understandable naman to. Hindi naman kayo mahihirapan. 10 question to. Ilagay ulit sa papel. So, thank you for listening and good morning.